Canadian-owned publication Collider posted one of the most vile, disgusting, and dare I say evil articles I've read in a long time, spewing all kinds of racist and sexist hate towards white males and blaming them for the failure of Lucasfilm and its crappy shows like The Acolyte. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you please hit the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications, and hit that like button so we hit that algorithm and get this out to more people. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And Collider, if you're unfamiliar with them, they are owned by a Canadian corporation called Barnett, which runs and owns a number of other left-wing entertainment websites such as MovieWeb, Screen Rant, and CBR. And they published an article written by Cameron Barnett titled Star Wars' Biggest Problem is the Fans. And in that article, it dismisses legitimate criticisms that people have of The Acolyte and instead accuses white male Star Wars fans of being bigots, of being racists, and blaming them for not watching the terrible garbage tier television shows like The Acolyte that Lucasfilm is creating. This is what he writes in his article. Leslie Headland's groundbreaking series has been relentlessly review bombed online. Absolutely not. It's people expressing their opinions. You don't like those opinions, so you are attaching a negative connotation to them and thus lying. That's going to be a repeating theme with Cameron Barnett because this man is an SJW. He is a woke cultist. He is a death cultist. And what do SJWs, woke cultists, and death cultists do? They lie, they double down on their lies, and they project. And he fits this to a T. He goes on and says, causing The Acolyte to possess a huge disparity between its positive critical reception and abysmal audience score on aggregate websites like Rotten Tomatoes. Well, we know that critics do not actually review movies and television shows honestly. There is an entire interview of a Sci-Fi Wire editor admitting this. We have documented evidence that third-party companies were paying for positive Rotten Tomatoes reviews on the critic score. He goes on, since the majority of these hate-filled criticisms are either overreactions to alleged continuity errors within the Star Wars universe or backlash aimed at attacking the show's long overdue inclusivity. So that's where he's really mad at. He's mad that his inclusive ideology is being lampooned. It's being rejected. People are saying no to it. They're not engaging in it. They're not watching it. They're not poisoning their minds with this ideology that he wants you to have your minds poisoned with. That's his big problem. The bad actors spreading them are clearly spinning controversy out of nothing, even though he literally just said there were continuity errors. But we're now spinning out of nothing. And he can't even keep his story straight within the same sentence. And this manufactured outrage can be directly traced back to the demographics of the original trilogy. Now, what could he mean by that? What could he mean by that? We'll get to that. But first, there is nothing wrong with pointing out that the Acolyte, Lucasfilm, and the Walt Disney Company are promoting inclusivity. In fact, it is just and right to do so, given inclusivity is an evil ideology that prioritizes demonizing white men. There's a reason why the Walt Disney Company is facing an EEOC complaint from America First Legal. They're being exposed as having race-based hiring practices by James O'Keefe. Multiple Disney executives have said this publicly and recorded by O'Keefe and shared to his O'Keefe Media Group YouTube channel and X account. That's what inclusivity is. It's anti-white and specifically anti-white male. So there's nothing wrong with pointing out that that is an evil ideology and it should be opposed. And the Walt Disney Company is clearly embracing it and trying to spread it through their programming. The show also has introduced numerous continuity problems, They introduced a force replacement called the Thread. The show claims that a pair of lesbian space witches created 2 twins through the Thread. And it has multiple Jedi discover a Sith attack, despite the Jedi believing the Sith to be extinct for over a millennia, based on dialogue from The Phantom Menace. So there's lots of problems with this show. Changes Ki-Adi-Mundi's birth year. He's like literally just in the show, and he shouldn't even be born yet. Lots of problems with the show. And legitimate problems. And that's just like continuity problems. That's not on top of like the terrible story, the terrible pacing, the terrible dialogue, the terrible acting, how it's shot, combat sequences. I mean, the show is just really poor quality overall. Despite, even if it was just outside of Star Wars, it's a bad show. It's boring. The show's boring too. But this is what he means when he says the demographics of the original trilogy. He's talking about white men. He says this. The first film in the original trilogy, originally just titled Star Wars upon its 1977 release, was shown to the public during a decade of classic hits like Steven Spielberg's Jaws in 1975 and Rocky in 1976. This was a time when Hollywood relied almost exclusively on traditional tropes to tell stories exclusively through a Eurocentric white male lens. What is he even talking about? There's plenty of blaxploitation films from the 70s. This guy is a clown. He's lying. Another lie. He doesn't stop there, though. Despite taking place in a galaxy far, far away from the filmmaking conventions of Earth, Star Wars' original trilogy features a mostly white cast, female characters with largely unrealized potential. What? Unrealized potential? George Lucas just commented on this and said people like this are off their rocker. What are you talking about? Princess Leia is leading the rebellion. She's the one in charge. And here's the big kicker right here. This is what he's really upset about. And no LGBTQ plus storylines depicted on screen. 100% bet that this guy is living a disordered lifestyle. And he's lashing out because he knows that his lifestyle is wrong. He knows that engaging in this is wrong. But he's got to double down. He's got to double down because he's got to make himself feel good about it. But he knows deep down what he's doing is wrong. Because it's unnatural. It's unnatural. So if it wasn't clear by now, the entire piece is written purely based on Barnett's evil ideology. Obviously, Barnett wants to push disordered lifestyles and various woke ideologies and wants to use Star Wars as a vehicle to do it. He's upset that a significant portion of the Star Wars fan base rejects him, and he's now lashing out. I 100% believe that. That's exactly what this guy is doing. And as I said, he follows the 3 laws of the SJW as defined by Vox Day in his excellent book, SJWs Always Lie, taking down the thought police, because they do. They always lie, they always double down, and they always project. Because he does double down. He says, while powerful female leaders like Mon Mothma and Carrie Fisher's iconic Princess Leia are outspoken forces for good in the trilogy, the latter's relationship with the Force and her father is glossed over in favor of her brother. And Leia's infamous bikini scene at Jabba's palace in Star Wars Return of the Jedi feels like fodder for a generation of male fantasies. So he literally admits that he's a liar. He points out that these 2 female characters are actually leading the rebellion. But he tries to justify his lie by saying that the main protagonist of the Star Wars films is Luke Skywalker. He's mad that Luke Skywalker is the main protagonist of the film. And it's not a woman. Whew. This is who Disney Star Wars wants to watch their shows. These absolutely hateful individuals. Hateful. This man is a hateful person. He goes on to claim this. The narrative quality of Disney's sequel trilogy aside, so he's admitting that it sucks. Like, he's literally admitting that it sucks. The movie's progressive decision to hire Daisy Ridley as Rey. Again, it's all about ideology, right? He admits that the movies suck and that there's legitimate criticism of them, but he's not going to let that stand in the way of him attacking white male Star Wars fans to hammer his ideology, because that's all he cares about. The movie's progressive decision to hire Daisy Ridley as Rey and John Boyega as Finn marked important first for the franchise's leads. I don't even know what he's talking about here. We already had Lando Calrissian. We already had Carrie Fisher, which he literally talks about earlier in the article. So again, the guy's clearly just lying. He's lying. The guy's a liar. Yet these casting decisions also resulted in constant online harassment for both actors in the aftermath of their performances, with many detractors trying to drag Star Wars back to a less inclusive past. Well, Daisy Ridley basically rejected this whole BS that the guy's spewing. She did this in an interview with the Today Show. She says this: I think my take is things get blown out of proportion, and the interactions I've ever had with people have been nothing but wonderful and supportive. And honestly, the day we announced I was coming back at Celebration last year, you cannot imagine the joy and goodwill in that room. So I've only ever been embraced. And I think we're going to make a great film, and people will love it. So even Daisy Ridley says no. You're a liar. He then continued to lie, pointing to the now debunked Access Media claim that these Valnet publications repeated ad nauseum for the last 5 years, half decade. That actress Kelly Marie Tran, she played Rose Tico in the sequel trilogy, quit Instagram due to Star Wars fans. This is what he wrote. Kelly Marie Tran's heartwarming performance as Rose Tico drew the ire of a racist internet horde, causing Tran to quit Instagram in order to look out for her mental health. Well, let's see what Kelly Marie Tran had to say. Well, she wrote a whole op-ed in the New York Times and explained why she left social media. The op-ed makes absolutely no mention that her decision had anything to do with Star Wars fans. In fact, the only mention of Star Wars is at the end of the op-ed, where she declares, I am the first woman of color to have a leading role in a Star Wars movie. That's all she says about Star Wars. Does not say anything about Star Wars fans harassing her, driving her to quit Instagram. Another lie. Easily researched, easily disproven. But these people constantly lie, hit you again over and over and over with a lie, so they make you believe that that's the truth when it is not, because they don't care. They don't care about the truth. It's all about pushing the ideology, and they will lie to do it. And that's exactly what this guy is doing. It's very abundantly clear throughout this entire article. And he does this again, where he makes it clear that the entire purpose of the article is to attack opponents of LGBTQ lifestyles and ideologies. He wrote this: not only did the final film in the sequel trilogy, 2019's The Rise of Skywalker, greatly reduce Rose's screen time, but the brief lesbian kiss featured in the background at the very end of the movie felt disappointing for audience members who waited so long for sincere queer storylines. That's all it's about. He just wants you to be gay like him. And he wants to use Star Wars as a vehicle to push gay lifestyles, which are unnatural and should not be approved ever. He goes on to write this: thankfully, the most recent installments in the Star Wars universe have built upon the franchise's contemporary legacy by including more representative storylines in an age of digital hate. The lesbian relationship between Vel Sartha and Clinta Kaz in Andor marks an important step forward for LGBTQ plus inclusion in Star Wars, as does the relationship between Osha and May's mothers in the Acolyte. Again, that's all it's about. It's all about pushing the gay agenda. That's all this guy cares about. And he knows who's opposing him. It's predominantly white men. And that's why he's attacking them. Because white men are opposing this disgusting, evil, unnatural, sick ideology. He concludes his article writing this: the most vocal viewers of the franchise wield the power of the internet in order to push a bigoted agenda that originates from the prejudices of an earlier time. While mainstream Star Wars content has grown to produce meaningful narratives while being bogged down by hate in the background. True fans understand that the Star Wars universe is a sci-fi wonderland where anything can happen and anyone belongs. And the future looks bright for those who have already opened up their minds to the compassion that all audience members should have learned a long time ago. That's not compassion. He's not talking about compassion. He's twisting words. It's not compassionate to let someone enslave themselves to the LGBTQ lifestyle, rot their mind, and destroy their body and tar their soul. That's not compassion. It's wrong to do that. It's wrong to let people wallow in mental and spiritual slavery. True compassion is to tell them the truth. Walk with them on a journey away from these evil ideologies. And sometimes people are so lost that you do have to dust your sandals and just pray for them. No amount of dialoguing, talking, walking with them is going to help, and you have to let God work his magic. You have to let him soften their heart. And prayer is a powerful, powerful tool, weapon that we have to do that. But I also found it ironic that he spends the entire article condemning white males while revealing that he's the actual racist and misandrist because he's clearly hating on white males. But then he has the gall to claim Star Wars is a place that anyone belongs. Well, then why are you spending your entire article hating on white men if Star Wars is actually a place where anyone belongs? Well, that's because he's lying. His true purpose is clearly not to have Star Wars be for anyone. It's only for anyone that enslaves themselves to these woke, hateful ideologies that he is promoting and that he clearly has enslaved himself to. Furthermore, as he actually notes, fans have no power over the content that Lucasfilm creates. Maybe if it's something that Jon Favreau creates. He says he does actually listen to fan feedback. But Charmino Bates-Chenoy says she's not listening to fans. Leslie Headland clearly has not listening to people. Kathleen Kennedy doesn't listen to anyone. That's for sure. Ryan Johnson was calling people man babies. Wasn't listening to anyone. J.J. Abrams didn't listen to anyone either. Was all on board the woke train. Filoni clearly doesn't listen to anyone. Doesn't even listen to George. Brought back Ahsoka. She should be dead. George wanted her dead. Even Filoni admitted that. So the real problem with Star Wars is the fact that it has hired degenerate, woke, and enslaved ideologues in an attempt to promulgate the various ideologies to unsuspecting viewers. That's the real problem with Star Wars, because that's what they're doing. Fortunately, they're incompetent, inept. They suck at their jobs, and they aren't telling compelling, interesting stories, mainly because the stories that they are telling are full of disgusting, vile, evil ideologies. And most people find that instinctively repulsive. And people aren't watching it. They're tuning out. They're tuning out of Star Wars. Or at the very least, they've tuned out of watching the actual shows that Lucasfilm and Disney are making. And they now watch shows like the WDW Pro Show, like Critical Drinker, like Nerdrotic, lampooning what Star Wars has become, laughing at it, talking about how awful and terrible it is. And this is what Barnett is really mad about, in my opinion. He's lost the opportunity to brainwash people and degenerate them. Star Wars is no longer a powerful vehicle to inject the woke messaging as it once was. And this is in large part due to more and more people simply saying no. And I think that more people should say no. And we should say no to Barnett and his disgusting, vile, evil racism and misandry. Those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.